He made his camp that night on a piece of high ground where there was a windbreak formed of a tree felled by lightning. He no sooner got his fire to burn than he saw across the prairie in the darkness another fire. Like his, it twisted in the wind. Like his, it warmed one man alone. It was an old hunter in camp, and the hunter shared tobacco with him and told him of the buffalo and the stands he'd made against them. I seen Studebaker wagons with 6 and 8 ox teams headed out for the grounds not hauling a thing but lead. Just pure galena, tons of it. On this ground alone between the Arkansas River and the Concho, there was 8 million carcasses, for that's how many hides reached the trailhead. 2 years ago, we pulled out from Griffin for a last hunt. We ransacked the country, 6 weeks. Finally found a herd of 8 animals, and we killed them and come in. They're gone. Every one of them that God ever made is gone as if they'd never been at all. I could open this video a lot of different ways. That is not a surprise. If you've ever read Blood Meridian before, you know exactly what I mean. Cormac McCarthy has basically laid out mankind's greatest hits of violence and destruction and bloodshed, Wild West edition, and I could have picked anywhere to start with this, and it would have been shocking and crazy. So why did I pick the damn buffalo? There's a couple reasons why I picked the damn buffalo. First and foremost, history matters. And that means the buffalo matter. Blood Meridian is a historical fiction, and what our old hunter friend is telling our main character there is a thing that actually happened in our time. Before we get on to my second reason why I picked the buffalo, we're going to have a little history lesson in case anyone doesn't know about what happened with the buffalo. From PBS, we're going to look at their nature archive, American Buffalo, Spirit of a Nation. Modern bison can weigh up to 2,000 pounds. They can be more than a dozen feet long and stand up to 6 feet tall at their massive shoulder hump, which serves as a storehouse for energy-rich fat. By the time America's earliest peoples had established villages about 20,000 years ago, the bison dominated the rolling grasslands and forested hillsides that stretched west from the Mississippi River west to the Rocky Mountains. Researchers estimate that prairie bison alone number between 30 million and 200 million, while a woodland variant existed in smaller numbers. Though killing such large, fast animals was a formidable task, ancient tribes soon perfected several effective techniques. In the 1500s, however, things began to change. First, Spanish explorers introduced horses to the region. By the 1800s, Native Americans had learned to use the speedy steeds to chase bison, dramatically expanding their hunting range and effectiveness. Next, guns made their way into the hands of buffalo hunters, making them increasingly deadly hunters. But it was the arrival of vast waves of white settlers in the 1800s and their conflict with the Native American residents of the prairies that spelled the end for the buffalo. Among the earliest waves of settlers were trappers and traders, people who made their living selling meat and hides. By the 1870s, they were shipping hundreds of thousands of buffalo hides eastward each year. More than 1.5 million were packed aboard trains and wagons in the winter of 1872 to 73 alone. The commercial killers, however, weren't the only ones shooting bison. Train companies offered tourists the chance to shoot buffalo from the windows of their coaches, pausing only when they ran out of ammunition or the gun's barrels became too hot. There were even buffalo killing contests. In one, a Kansan set a record by killing 120 bison in just 40 minutes. Buffalo Bill Cody, hired to slaughter the animals, killed more than 4,000 buffalo in just 2 years. Some U.S. government officials even promoted the destruction of bison herds as a way to defeat their Native American enemies, who were resisting the takeover of their lands by white settlers. One congressman, James Throckmorton of Texas, believed it would be a great step forward in the civilization of the Indians and the preservation of peace on the border if there was not a buffalo in existence. Soon, military commanders were ordering their troops to kill buffalo, not for food, but to deny Native Americans their own source of food. One general believed that buffalo hunters did more to defeat the Indian nations in a few years than soldiers did in 50. By 1880, the slaughter was almost over. Where millions of buffalo once roamed, only a few thousand animals remained. Soon, their numbers dwindled, with the largest wild herd, just a few hundred animals, sheltered in the isolated valleys of the newly created Yellowstone National Park. So yeah, that's a brief history of the buffalo hunt. It's a very real thing that happened, and some of the pictures I've had going alongside with this probably demonstrate to you the severity of it, how many of them actually were killed, and how it was happening en masse. The thing about the buffalo hunt is that it's something that only a human could ever come up with, and that's something that I found myself thinking when the buffalo hunter was reflecting in Blood Meridian, is that it is a pretty uniquely human thing. He reflects on this himself, and it's a very special moment in the book, and that's why it stood out to me. That's the second reason why the buffalo matter. Because for the first time in 320-something pages of violence and bloodshed and nobody coming out of it clean, somebody stops and has a genuine moment of reflection. Someone who actually committed a genocide and someone who actually has a lot of blood on their hands and is cognizant of that. There's no one to intervene. There's nothing to stop this moment. It's just two guys on the prairie exchanging stories and one guy finally actually having a moment to stop and think. The ragged sparks blew down the wind. The prairie about them lay silent. Beyond the fire it was cold and the night was clear and the stars were falling. The old hunter pulled his blanket about him. "I wonder if there's other worlds like this," he said, "or if this is the only one." And it's a really simple moment of reflection, right? But it's coming from somebody who's done some really heinous stuff in their time. Now, if you have read Blood Meridian before, you know there's other moments of introspection that happen, but there's always somebody looming over them, and that would be Judge Holden. He's always got something to object to a moment of introspection, and this moment happens absent of that character. If he was around, you'd be met with a line kinda like this. "Hold now," said Tobin. The question was put in all earnestness. "And the answer," said the judge. "If God meant to intervene in the degeneracy of mankind, would he not have done so by now? Wolves cull themselves, man. What other creature could? And the race of man not more predacious yet?" And that is Judge Holden in a nutshell. He's designed to keep people here in the world of killing and death and materialism. But before I get too far into that, we gotta go ahead and give like a spoiler warning for sure. I'm gonna be doing spoilers for this book. If you haven't read Blood Meridian, I highly recommend you do. Although I'll be honest with you, it does not take away anything to know stuff about the story. If anything, it might compel you to want to read it more. Secondly, I do need to issue a bit of a violence warning. There are some pretty graphic depictions of man-on-man violence and man-on-nature violence and nature-on-nature violence that occur throughout this book, and I'm actually going to be citing some of them and reading them out, and I'm not really planning to censor any of it. I'm not monetized, and none of it is like no words. It's just intense. That said, this one's gonna get a little rough. Strap in. Blood Meridian is a violent book. It is basically war. This book here, this is war and violence and death. Pure and simple. It's 340 pages of just nonstop drag out violence. We're talking 1800s American Southwest. Shoot first, ask questions later was probably an actual lifestyle choice rather than a joke. And you see that demonstrated a lot in the book, and our main character actually catches a pretty nasty dose of shoot first, ask questions later very early on in his life. The mother dead these 14 years did incubate in her own bosom the creature who would carry her off. The father never speaks her name, the child does not know it. He has a sister in this world that he will not see again. He watches, pale and unwashed. He can neither read nor write, and in him broods already a taste for mindless violence. All history present in that visage, the child, the father of the man. At 14, he runs away. He will not see again the freezing kitchen house in the pre-dawn dark, the firewood, the washpots. He wanders as far as Memphis, a solitary migrant upon that flat and pastoral landscape. On a certain night, a Maltese boatswain shoots him in the back with a small pistol. Swinging to deal with the man, he's shot again just below the heart. The man flees, and he leans against the bar with the blood running out of his shirt. The others look away. He lies in a cot in the room upstairs for 2 weeks, while the tavern keeper's wife attends him. By the time he's mended, he has no money to pay her, and he leaves in the night and sleeps on the riverbank until he can find a boat that will take him on. The boat is going to Texas. And that is the start of our main character's life in this book. That's what we come into. The 14 years old runs away from home, gets shot, nearly dies, ends up not having any way to pay back the person that nursed him, and he runs off and he goes to Texas. And it's not a strange thing to happen back then. A lot of people were going west and southwest. There was a gold rush, there was land, everyone wanted to take something. Now you'll notice I'm referring to our main character as main character and not protagonist, and that is because in my wholehearted, genuine belief, there is not a single good guy in this book. There's so much bloodshed, and a lot of it is needless, a lot of it is senseless, and a lot of it is crazy. Nobody comes out of this without blood on their hands in some way, shape, or form, including our main character. The rationale and the reason behind it is different and varied depending on what character it is and who they're killing and what's happening, but the point is, it happens all over the book. Shortly after our main character, the kid, makes his way to Texas, he meets a man named Toadvine, and they have their first run-in with a guy called Judge Holden. Judge Holden is, depending on how you look at it, an archon of judgment. Depending on how you look at it, a bad motherfucker. Depending on how you look at it, really weird, and probably a pedophile. So anyways, Judge Holden walks into the middle of a sermon, talks all this good shit on a priest. Everyone goes up in arms about it, starts shooting guns, people start dying. They eventually try to kill the guy, and he, I think, makes it out if I remember correctly. Either way, Judge Holden revels in the violence that he's able to stir in people, and that's kind of his MO. He silently stokes the violence and the warfare. And from that protest that he gave earlier to someone trying to introspect on the violence and warfare, you can kind of see his whole thing is to keep you geared into it. And it's for that reason alone I'm actually going to stay away from talking about him too much. He is easy to talk about. He's a very compelling character. He's very well written. Like, I hate to say it, there's a lot of stuff about the guy that is aspirational. He knows a gajillion languages. He knows how to dance. He knows how to play instruments. He's educated. He can shoot a gun. He knows chemistry. Like, the dude's fucking wild, right? Tall, jacked, bald as a motherfucker, but like, I don't want to focus on him. He's easy to focus on, and that's not an accident. Anyways, I'm gonna keep shortcutting through things here because this is a long book and a lot of things do happen, but the good stuff is yet to come, right? The kid gets split from Toadvine. He ends up joining a military company, and they're going out for righteous warfare with the goal of killing Mexicans. Now, here's the fun thing about that. The war is over. The Mexican war ended already, but not according to these guys. They gotta go out there and they gotta do some killing. So the kid enlists and he joins the company. And this is where we get met with our first real taste of disgusting, awful violence in Blood Meridian. While they're out going to get some people and do some killing, they're beset by Comanche warriors, a legion of horribles. Hundreds in number, half naked or clad in costumes Attic or biblical or wardrobed out of the fevered dream of the skins of animals and silk finery and pieces of uniform still tracked with the blood of prior owners. A rattling drove of arrows passed through the company, and men tottered and dropped from their mounts. Horses were rearing and plunging, and the Mongol hordes swung up along their flanks and turned and rode full upon them with lances. The kid's horse sank beneath him with a long pneumatic sigh. He had already fired his rifle, and now he sat on the ground and fumbled with his shot pouch. Everywhere there were horses down, and he saw men lanced and caught up by the hair and scalped standing, and he saw the horses of war trample down the fallen, riding down the unhorsed Saxons and spearing and clubbing them and leaping from their mounts with knives and running about on the ground with a peculiar bandy-legged trot, like creatures driven to alien forms of locomotion, and stripping the clothes from the dead, seizing them up by the hair and passing their blades about the skulls of the living and the dead alike, and snatching aloft the bloody wigs and hacking and chopping at the naked bodies, ripping off limbs, heads, gutting the strange white torsos and holding up great handfuls of viscera and genitals. Some of the savages so slathered up with the gore they might have rolled in it like dogs, and some who fell upon the dying and sodomized them with loud cries to their fellows. And somehow miraculously our main character survives this. Now, you could call that a good thing, you could call it a bad thing. Personally, I think if I witnessed all of that or any of that, I'd probably be scarred for life. That's like a PTSD thing for sure. I don't think I'd ever look at any of the things involved with that the same, but maybe that's just me. Either way, it's graphic and it's intense and it's violent, but that's just kind of how things were back then. Scalping was normal and it was real, and that was a thing people did. Scalp hunting was a real thing. And war didn't really have any conventions yet. There was no rules about what you could or couldn't do. It was vicious, it was violent, it was brutal, it was meant to break the spirits of people, if not utterly destroy them. Now, sometime after the kid survives this whole incident, he actually ends up getting back in touch with Toadvine from earlier on in the book, and they join up with a guy named Glanton. John Joel Glanton. Here's our second history lesson inbound, by the way. Glanton gang was a real group of people. John Glanton was a real person. And in the book, the kid, Toadvine, and a whole host of other people join this guy, and they go out west. His name is Glanton, said Toadvine. He's got a contract with Trias. They're to pay him $100 a head for scalps and $1,000 for Gomez's head. I told him there was 3 of us. Gentlemens, we're getting out of this shithole. We ain't got no outfits. He knows that. He said he'd find anybody that was a guaranteed hand and take it out of their shares. So don't let on like you ain't no seasoned Indian killer, cause I claimed we was 3 of the best. And now we have to go on to our second history lesson. You heard that right, Indian killer. They're going out there to kill Indians. John Glanton actually did get contracted to go scalp Indians. This was a real thing that happened. People did get contracted to go kill Indians. The government paid out. Different local governments paid out. So for our second history lesson, we're going over the Texas State Historical Association. The life and legacy of John Joel Glanton, soldier, outlaw, and bounty hunter. John Joel Glanton, soldier of fortune, outlaw, and notorious bounty hunter and murderer, was born in 1819 with twin brother Julian in Edgefield County, South Carolina, to Charles William and Margaret Hill Glanton. John Glanton developed a reputation from his explosive violence and was reported to be an outlaw in Tennessee before his arrival in Texas. In 1835, he was living with his parents in Gonzales, Texas. His fiancée was abducted, scalped, and killed by Lipan Apaches that year. On October 2nd, he joined the movement to San Antonio to dislodge General Martin Perfecto de Caz. Glanton was a free scout for the Army under Colonel James W. Fanon Jr. and allegedly a Texas Ranger captain at 16. He returned to Louisiana, where on March 11, 1841, he was arrested for shooting a pistol at a police officer in the American Theater in New Orleans. Since no one was injured during the performance, Glanton received little or no punishment. After the Texas Revolution, he joined the Ranger Company of Captain John C. Hayes in protecting San Antonio, where he courted Joaquina Menchaca, the daughter of respected former Mayor Jose Antonio Menchaca, and called the most beautiful woman in the Republic of Texas. They married in October 1846, and Joaquina became pregnant shortly thereafter. During the Mexican War, he scouted as a free ranger with Colonel Hayes for General Zachary Taylor. On January 13, 1847, he enlisted in Captain Walter P. Lane's company. He rendered heroic service in clearing northern Mexico of guerrillas in the Chevalier Battalion. While in Lane's company, Glanton killed an unarmed Mexican and stole his horse. Mexican authorities protested, and Taylor ordered Glanton arrested, but Lane warned Glanton of his impending arrest, and he escaped into Texas. The illness and subsequent death of his infant son troubled him. He deserted his unit at Encantada, Mexico on October 18, 1846, but later joined Captain Jacob Roberts' company, which served as the vanguard of Brigadier General Lane's forces at skirmish at Guadalajara Pass. He earned recognition for his actions at both Matamoros and Guadalajara Pass. As a result, he joined Captain Ford's Special Spy Company and was elected a lieutenant. He was discharged from the company on April 30th, 1848 at Camp Washington near Veracruz. He then returned to San Antonio in mid-1848 as a minor war hero before the end of the year was elected as lieutenant. In mid-1849, he rode out of San Antonio for California with 30 well-armed gold seekers, leaving his wife and a daughter. He led a small expedition along the Chihuahua route to California, but became stranded in Mexico, where their funds and supplies were unexpectedly depleted. And that's where we're going to call the history lesson for now. The rest of the story actually does follow pretty accurately. His real life story does track with the way the rest of his life ends here in the book. And the majority of the book does follow this guy, John Joel Glanton. The kid is in his company for a large portion of the book, and they do a lot of killing. They do a lot of scalping, they do a lot of murdering, and it's a whole lot of people that are both peaceful and non. And John Glanton becomes a really nasty guy who's not just doing contract work, he's actually faking the work so he can get paid. So let's continue on in the book. One of our very first depictions of John Glanton in action is him wantonly killing things that are around him as target practice to test out pistols he's about to purchase. So this is where my whole thought line with this book comes in. The subversion of man over nature in this book is very strong. The way man overtakes nature and bends it to his will is startlingly well depicted in this book, and it's something that really jumped out to me. And when we got to the buffalo killing, by the end of the book, there's been so much other stuff involving animals that I'm like, okay, animals and the way we overtake nature is a big theme in this, at least to me. And that's something that kind of sits with me because we're the only things on this earth that really do that. Glanton leveled the huge pistol in one hand and thumbed back the hammer. The explosion in that dead silence was enormous. The cat simply disappeared. There was no blood or cry. It just vanished. Glanton thumbed back the hammer once again and swung the pistol. A group of fowl in the corner of the courtyard that had been pecking in the dry dust stood nervously, their heads at varied angles. The pistol roared and one of the birds exploded in a cloud of feathers. The others began to trot mutely, their long necks craned. He fired again. A second bird spun and lay kicking. The others flared, piping thinly, and Glanton turned with the pistol and shot a small goat that was standing with its throat pressed to the wall in terror, and it fell stone dead in the dust. John Glanton, everybody. I want to buy a pistol. Let's kill some shit with it to test it out. Would you want to work for the guy? I wouldn't want to work for the guy, but hey, I guess other people do. And here's the thing, that's where we kind of have to bridge into another theme in this book that actually really stood out to me, is that violence seems to be a universal language. It's something that doesn't discriminate by race or creed. It doesn't matter what color skin you have or what language you speak or where you come from. Violence is something everybody understands and is fluent in this book. And I'd argue it's something that all of mankind is fluent in, whether they want to admit it or not. I'm pretty sure there's an old saying that there's no honor among thieves and there's no honor among killers, something along that effect. But the point is, there might not be honor, but there is understanding. And that's something that's actually pretty adequately demonstrated later on in the book. As the gang is traveling about and scalping folks and trying to get that bag, there's a little bit of tension inside of the camp that occurs. It's a racially motivated tension, and we're talking a band of people that is composed of white people, black people, Mexicans, Native Americans, people that don't speak English, people that hardly speak English, racists and non-racists alike. And I'll be honest with you, most people were racist back then. The hard R's all over this book. But like, who hasn't been a hard R throughout history? I think Irish people were hard R's at one point, Italian people were hard R's at one point. I want to take that shit back, Nick. There were 2 fires in this camp, and no rules, real or tacit, as to who should use them. But when the white man looked to the other fire, he saw that the Delawares and John McGill and the new men in the company had taken their supper there, and with a gesture and a slurred oath he warned the black away. Here beyond men's judgments all covenants were brittle. The black looked up from his pipe bowl. About that fire were men whose eyes gave back the light like coals socketed hot in their skulls, and men whose eyes did not. Any man in this company can sit where it suits him, he said. The white man swung his head, one eye half closed, his lip loose. His gun belt lay coiled on the ground. He reached and drew the revolver and cocked it. "You aim to shoot me?" said the black. "You don't get your black ass away from this fire or I'll kill you graveyard dead. Is that your final say? Final is the judgment of God." The black looked once more across the flames at Glanton, and then he moved away in the dark. The white man uncocked the revolver and placed it on the ground before him. Jackson sat with his legs crossed. One hand lay in his lap, and the other was outstretched on his knee, holding a slender black cigarillo. The nearest man to him was Tobin, and when the black stepped out of the darkness, bearing the bowie knife in both hands, like some instrument of ceremony, Tobin started to rise. The white man looked up drunkenly, and the black stepped forward, and with a single stroke swapped off his head. 2 thick ropes of dark blood and 2 slender rose like snakes from the stump of his neck and arched hissing into the fire. The head rolled to the left and came to a rest at the ex-priest's feet where it lay with eyes aghast. Glanton rose. The men moved away. No one spoke. When they set out in the dawn, the headless man was sitting like a murdered anchorite. Someone had taken his gun, but the boots stood where he'd put them. The company rode on. They had not gone forth 1 hour upon that plain before they were ridden upon by Apaches. So no one goes up in arms about it, no one's going to say anything about it. It was just understood that one guy was threatening to kill the other, The other man took great offense to that and killed him back. The reality is, that same man who threatened his life then likely wouldn't have protected his life later and very well could have threatened it. But regardless of the reason, regardless of the rationale, violence is something they all universally understand, and it's something they're all just kind of okay with. If someone dies out in the West, they're dead and that's all there is to it. Now, the whole group is beset by Apaches, they're on the run, and they spend a lot of this book on the run, I'm not gonna lie. There's a lot of times where they get ambushed and people are chasing them down. And it's not a coincidence or a surprise necessarily. The boys don't exactly get up to the best behavior when they roll into town. They like to do a lot of drinking and shooting, a whole lot of debauchery happening. Unfortunately, that means people end up dead a lot of the time. But it's not just the Glanton gang that's full of weird, strange, crazy people who interact weird with the world around them, right? I haven't really gotten into any of the Glanton gang's interactions with nature, but there is one that does show up pretty soon on into the book after they run away from the Apaches. They come across this little rundown village of people who are just kind of like barely making it by, and there's a nasty snake-bitten horse running around, and they're keeping it. He looked at them. They were foul and ragged and half-crazed. They'd been making forays at night up the arroyo for wood and water, and they'd been feeding off a dead mule that laid gutted and stinking in the far corner of the yard. The first thing they asked for was whiskey, and the next was tobacco. They had but 2 animals, and one of these had been snake-bit in the desert, and this thing now stood in the compound with its head enormously swollen and grotesque, like some fabled equine ideation out of an attic tragedy. It had been bitten on the nose, and its eyes bulged out of the shapeless head in a horror of agony, and it tottered moaning toward the clustered horses of the company, with its long, misshapen muzzle swinging and drooling, and its breath wheezing in the throttled pipes of its throat. The skin had split open along the bridge of its nose, and the bone shone through pinkish white. The American horses began to mill and separate along the wall at its approach, and it swung after them blindly. There was a flurry of thumps and kicks, and the horses began to circle the compound. A small mottled stallion belonging to one of the Delawares came out of the remuda and struck at the thing twice, and then turned and buried its teeth in its neck. Out of the mad horse's throat came a sound that brought the men to the door. "Why don't you shoot that thing?" said Irving. "Sooner it dies, the sooner it'll rot," they said. Irving spat. "You aim to eat it and it's snake bit?" They looked at one another. They didn't know. So now we start getting into some of the weird nature stuff going on, right? That's a pretty nasty depiction of a horse getting wrecked by nature. And then we get another depiction of another horse running up and wrecking his shit too. And that's the thing, man. For all the violence that humanity does to each other and we do to nature, it's not like it's all peaceful and happy out there in nature itself. If we weren't here, this kind of death and chaos would still be going on. There would still be snake-bitten horses in the desert. Or well, I guess maybe there wouldn't be, because then we wouldn't have brought the horses over here, so, maybe not. But I bet the snakes would have bit something else. All the same. Snake-bitten buffalo, maybe. My point is, it's rough out there. No matter what you are, no matter where you are, no matter what you're doing, man or beast alike, it's shots fired all the time. You got everyone wants the smoke constantly. And you know what? That's just the way of the world back then. As graphic as it all is, as violent as it all is, this is something that we've actually evolved out of and come from ourselves. So in that example, we get our first little demonstration of man subverting nature for its own ends. These people are keeping this snake-bitten, dying horse alive, and they want to eat it eventually, even though it's probably not even a smart idea in the first place. But rather than showing mercy and putting the thing out of its misery, rather than having some sort of common sense in their brain to maybe not eat a venom-ridden horse, they're keeping this thing alive and letting it suffer. And ultimately, that's something only man does, keep things alive and let them suffer for their own ends. It sounds pretty human. And that's the thing, man subverts nature all over this book. It goes deep. And there's a couple examples I want to draw you guys to. Did you know our boy Glanton likes dogs? This one's a little more gentle, but it's still man exerting its force over nature nonetheless. Our band of savages rides into a town and they stumble upon this dog, and Glanton decides he wants to take it with him. The hovel doors were waist high and faced the east, and few of the shelters were tall enough to be stood in. The last one that Glanton and David Brown entered was defended by a large and vicious dog. Brown drew his belt pistol, but Glanton stopped him. He dropped to one knee and spoke to the animal. It crouched against the rear wall of the hogan and bared its teeth and swung its head from side to side, the ears flattened alongside its skull. "He'll bite you," said Brown. "Get me a piece of jerky." He crouched, talking to the dog. The dog watched him. "You won't man that son of a bitch," said Brown. "I can man anything that eats. Get me a piece of jerky." When Brown came back with the dried meat, the dog was looking about uneasily. When they rode west out of the canyon, it was trotting with a slight limp at the heels of Glanton's horse. And let me tell you, that dog stays with Glanton. It stays with Glanton for the rest of its time on this earth, and the rest of his. Spoiler alert. And while we're at it, I'll draw your attention to the fact that the horses they've been riding this entire time, a lot of them are ones that have been with them for the entire journey. These animals become different. Their very nature changes during their time with these bloodthirsty crazies. At the town of Nakori, there was a cantina, and here the company dismounted and crowded through the doorway and took tables. Tobin volunteered to guard the horses. He stood watching up and down the street. No one paid him any mind. These people had seen Americans in plenty, dusty laggard trains of them months out of their own country and half crazed with the enormity of their own presence in that immense and blood-slaked waste. Now it was something near to an hour past noon, and a number of workers and tradesmen were crossing the street toward the cantina. As they passed Glanton's horse, Glanton's dog rose up bristling. They veered slightly and went on. At the same moment, a deputation of dogs of the village had started across the plaza, 5, 6 of them, their eyes on Glanton's dog. As they did so, a juggler leading a funeral rounded the corner into the street, and taking a rocket from among several under his arm, he held it to the cigarillo in his mouth and tossed it into the plaza where it exploded. The pack of dogs shied and scrambled back, save for 2 who continued into the street. Among the Mexican horses tethered at the bar before the cantina, several shot out a hind leg and the rest stepped about nervously. Glanton's dog did not take his eyes from the men moving toward the door. None of the American horses even raised an ear. So yeah, just a quick demonstration of the fact that these motherfuckers are built different from all the war and death and blood and gunshots and explosions that they've been around over the time that they've been traveling with these guys. These horses don't even notice. The other ones are still very much in their normal nature as a horse. When they hear something loud, they're going to get a little freaked out, right? Other dogs, when they hear something loud, they're going to go, "What the hell was that?" Not these guys. They've been around too much stuff that's like that and way more extreme. And just by their very exposure and just by their very teamwork with these awful crazy humans and what they've been doing, they are themselves different in their nature. Man has taken these animals and turned them into war machines. Now, there's one more example I want to pull up of man and nature interacting. And this one, it's got a bit of a light at the end of the tunnel. Our squad rolls up into Jesus Maria, and a certain somebody decides he wants to buy some dogs. The dog vendor took this for a bargaining device and studied the dogs anew to better determine their worth. But the judge had dredged from his polluted clothes a small gold coin worth a bushel of such priced dogs. He laid the coin in the palm of his hand and held it out, and with the other hand took the pups from their keeper, holding them in one fist like a pair of socks. He gestured with the gold. "Andale," he said. The boys stared at the coin. The judge made a fist and opened it. The coin was gone. He wove his fingers in the empty air and reached behind the boy's ears and took the coin and handed it to him. The boy held the coin in both hands before him like a small ciborium, and he looked up at the judge. But the judge had set forth, dogs dangling. He crossed upon the stone bridge, and he looked down into the swollen waters, and raised the dogs and pitched them in. At the farther end of the bridge gave onto a small street that ran along the river. Here the Van Diemen lander stood urinating from a stone wall into the water. When he saw the judge commit the dogs from the bridge, he drew his pistol and called out. The dogs disappeared into the foam. They swept one and the next down the broad green race over sheets of polished rock into the pool below. The Van Diemen lander raised and cocked the pistol. In the clear waters of the pool, willow leaves turned like jade dace. The pistol bucked in his hand, and one of the dogs leaped in the water, and he cocked it again and fired again, and a pink stain diffused. He cocked and fired the pistol a third time, and the other dog also blossomed and sank. The judge continued on across the bridge. So yeah, the guy I don't want to talk about, the judge, he's kind of a piece of shit, but that does basically embody him as a character. Yes, he is compellingly written, very well written character, but he does ultimately just want death and chaos and destruction everywhere he goes. On the bright side, Bathcat, otherwise known as the Van Diemen Lander, does show mercy on these dogs that he just condemned to death. I mean, he threw them into rushing waters and basically said, you're gonna die the long way. Versus this guy taking a piss off the wall, saw the thing happen, and was like, nah, they're going quick. Now, that all said, I'm gonna stand by what I said earlier on. There aren't any good guys in this. There aren't any. Even if there was a nice mercy killing on the one guy's part, every single one of these dudes has done a lot of killing in this book. Glanton led a small expedition along the Chihuahua route to California, but became stranded in Mexico where their funds and supplies were unexpectedly depleted. In Chihuahua City, Michael H. Chevalier and Glanton influenced the state legislature to pass the fifth law, Ley Quinto, over the veto of the governor, empowering Chevalier to contract with guerrillas to capture or kill troublesome Apache Indians. Chevalier entered the first contract the following day, and Glanton was in his company on several successful expeditions north of the capital. These bounty hunting campaigns were the source of bitter controversy in Chihuahua. By the third week of June, Glanton earned a contract as a government bounty hunter with the financing from United States Consul Benjamin Riddle. His campaigns during the remainder of 1849 were widespread, successful, and financially rewarding. By 1850, however, it became increasingly difficult for the Glanton gang to find hostile Apaches, and they began attacking peaceful agricultural Indians in the vicinity of Fort El Norte. Finally, they turned to taking Mexican scalps for profit. As a result, the Chihuahua government drove Glanton and his company into Sonora and put a bounty on his scalp. There he contracted with authorities to fight the Indians, traded Indian scalps for bounties, and again resorted to taking Mexican scalps to increase his profit. He and his gang seized and operated a river ferry controlled by the Yuma Indians. While operating the ferry, they reportedly killed Mexican and American passengers alike for their money and goods. At dawn, April 23, 1850, the normally friendly Yuma got their revenge on the interloping entrepreneurs. They killed most of the ferry workers and slit Glanton's throat in his tent. His body was taken to the U.S. side of the Colorado River, lashed to a dog, and burned with the animal. And you'd be remiss to not notice that I switched back over to history lesson there. That actually is just the rest of the Texas State Historical Association from earlier. That's Glanton's story. The way it ends in this book is very, very much the same. They do take a ferry. They have lots of successful expeditions. There's a whole lot of drinking and debauchery and death and all the nines, exactly like it says there in the history, right? And yeah, they do start taking scalps for profit that aren't people they should be killing. And if you want to be real, you shouldn't be scalping people for money in the first place. But that's besides the point. That's delusional. People are going to scalp people for money. It just looks different now than it did back then. But John Glanton does die. A lot of his gang dies too. The Yuma attack them at the ferry, and there's a couple hard R's thrown around, and then Glanton gets his head split in half with a hatchet. It's a lot more graphic in the book. Well, what about the kid? He's supposed to be the main character, right? You've hardly even mentioned the guy during this video. That's kind of the point, actually. The kid just kind of fades into the background for a lot of this. He's your main character insert. He's the eyes you see all the events through. He's the one that you see the small tender moments, like the buffalo hunter earlier when I started the video. But generally speaking, he's not exactly the main character for all this. He's your eyes into what's happening. The very first line of the book is "see the child," right? You're supposed to actually pay attention to the child, but he just fades in the background of men killing men, and men killing nature, and nature killing nature, and nature killing men. It's delusional to think we could ever live in a world where none of that stuff would happen. It will go on whether we're here or not. And you know what? I'll put a bow on the story here. I'll tell you, the kid, he dies in an outhouse. He gets killed by Judge Holden. There's no happy ending here. The only one who gets a happy ending is Judge Holden. He goes back to the tavern after he kills the kid, gets naked and dances. And like, it's not me trying to be nihilistic, and the book isn't trying to be nihilistic. There's an epilogue afterwards, and the epilogue made a lot of sense to me. A lone man in the desert strikes fire from the rock is essentially the shorthand version of it. And when you read this entire thing, all of the violence and bloodshed and craziness and chaos, and then the little tiny bits of hope start to creep in towards the end, and those little moments of introspection show up without the judge there, things start to sound a little more human in a good way than just all the bleak, nasty, bad ways, right? And by the time you get to the epilogue and man is striking fire from the rock, it kind of just intuitively made sense to me that we are adept at death and destruction and killing. We're adept at burning things down and tearing things apart. But we're also the only thing out there that can actually strike fire from the rock. We're the only thing out there that can actually create all of this that you see and live in and experience right now. I found myself wanting a second pass on this because there were a lot of themes in here that just really stood out to me, and I couldn't believe that so many were just packed into one book. Generally speaking, it all boils down to violence is a universal language, right? It's shared among all men and women, all colors and creeds, all languages, all roots. It's something that everybody knows, and everybody includes animals too. And no matter how far back you go through history, violence is a thing that's always been committed. Even before any settlers showed up here, there was no utopia. You think we came up with the scalping thing? There was plenty of death and fighting and war going on well before anyone showed up here and started documenting any of it. And then you look around and you think like, wow, we've really advanced, we've really evolved, we've really changed, right? But then I kind of stop and I really do think for a second, have we? Have we actually? We don't live in a time where people have to be battling for territory anymore. We don't live in a time where people have to be fighting every day for survival. And we don't live in a time where you have to go picking on other countries or picking on your neighbors. This shit is set in the 1800s. That's a long time ago. We've come a long way from the 1800s. It is not the Wild West anymore. You don't have to kill people, right? We don't have to be fighting for things anymore. Like, think about it. If you live in like California, Texas, New Mexico, anywhere around that area, how much blood was spilled on that land, man and beast alike? And then think about the rest of this country. And then think about where it is now. All that stuff happened, and it happened for a reason. It happened so you could be here now. The problem is, we're dropping the ball, man. We're supposed to be this enlightened society who's past warfare. We're supposed to be past all this petty shit. But that's kind of my point. It's our responsibility. At the end of the day, I read this, and I was like, wow, we're fucking terrible. Tell me something I don't know. And then I read the epilogue, and I said, you're right. We're the only ones that can make this right. For all the violence and for all the bloodshed, for all the craziness and chaos that goes into this book, I really walked away from this feeling a whole new different type of way about war. I was already anti-war to begin with, but I'm even more anti-war now because I realize, looking through history, and not just American Southwest history, looking at other history as well, how far we've come from the days of glorifying warfare and death. It really is on us. The responsibility is on us to do better. We need to understand that war just brings disillusionment and pain. It doesn't bring any benefit except anyone who's getting paid to actually have their war. That's ultimately the point of this video. Violence is a universal language, but I think logically, the lack of violence can be a universal language too, and I think it's one we all need to start speaking a little bit better. We need to be better to people. Stop fighting each other for stupid things. Stop taking petty arguments to levels that they don't need to go. Stop shooting each other over $5 worth of weed. Like, come on now. Obviously that's an exaggeration, but you know what I mean. It's not the Wild West anymore, folks. We're an advanced, grown people. We're in the most fortunate time to be alive ever. We have the most comforts you could ever ask for here, at least in the United States. Be thankful. Be good to the people around you. We don't have to do this shit anymore. We don't have to fight. I'm not delusional enough to think that we'll ever get to a point where war will ever stop. But I do think we need to kind of be more aware of what war looks like so we try harder to avoid it. And that's why our history is important, and that's why books like this, that have just enough fiction to make them engaging, and just enough history to make them relevant, matter. History matters. The damn buffalo matter. Anyways, this one's running long, so I'm gonna get out of here. I doubt anyone's gonna make it to the end of this one anyways. It's hard to compact down your thoughts on war and violence and peace and nature and man subverting all of it down into one video and try to make it like digestible. I did the best I could. If you did make it this far, thank you for sticking around. My throat's starting to dry up, so I'm glad I'm starting to wrap this one up anyways. Like I said, it's not the Wild West. I know we can't have some perfect warless utopia, but I really do think we could strive to be better people and strive to not do war. If anyone ever comes asking you to fight, tell them nope. So yeah, I'm gonna get out of here. You guys take it easy out there. The world's kind of crazy, but hey, if it's easy, fucking take it twice. And until I see you guys in the next one, keep an ear to the ground. Keep your eye on the prize. We'll see y'all.